will also be here in a minute, and I don't know about the other two, but we'll go ahead. We'll start with the review of the proposed fiscal year 2021 operating and capital budget.
So, Chairman, what I'm going to do is I've got a slideshow that is going to combine 2 and 3. So, proposed at normal tax rate also. I'm going to talk about that, and then the proposed operating budget. But there are 3 slides or 3 sections within this as relates to the operating and capital budget. And realistically, well, I'll get into that. But first, I want to go over the bond refunding that we did on August the 11th that will become final in September, I believe on September 11th also. As the board knows, we had existing bonds outstanding that had covenants in them that were onerous, especially as related to days cash on hand, in which it would require us to have certain levels. The end of this fiscal year at 80 days, and next fiscal year to be at 100 cash days. And if we fell out of that, we would be in technical default of the bonds. So our bonds were available to be called, meaning we could go back and refund them effective September 15th of this year. We've been 10 years in them, so we get 10 years, and then we can go back and refund them if we want. And if we have the benefit at the time of lower interest rates, then we get the benefit of that. So that's what we were able to accomplish. Now, we were also, as we've talked about in the board previously, able to take these bonds and take them before the Texas State Attorney, General Attorney, and have them converted into general government obligation bonds, which means that under our ad valorem tax, we could fund a portion of these bonds as opposed to funding them out of normal revenues. The purpose of doing that was to provide a greater security to the bondholders and thereby hope to be able to achieve a lower interest rate in doing so. As we said, we started this process back in January of this year. You'll remember that Doug Witt came and spoke with us, and then the attorneys from Norton Fulbright, Rose Fulbright came and spoke with us also, because it was a lawsuit that the board was going to have to bring in the state of Texas. So we got that accomplished, and then Bank of America came back and was able to get the bonds sold or refunded on August the 11th. So let me just go to that one slide, Castine, if you could.
Give me 1 second. Is it still not?
And show desktop. Where's your desktop?
Okay. So on August the 11th, we were able to refund these bonds. All right, so let's see if we can put the. So Samco, which is Doug Witt, Norton Rose Fulbright, which is the attorneys, and Bank of America were our lead advisors.
He's got it.
Now, using a finance term, meaning the total present value of savings, meaning if we look at the income cash savings over the 10 years that these bonds are outstanding, using a normal interest rate calculation, we saved $7.6 million net present value. We'll end up actually saving close to $12 million in cash out, but on a present day calculation, it's worth 7.6. If you recall, when we started this with Doug, I believe he was in the $2 to $3.5 million range was what they thought we would save ultimately. And so we came in at 7.6. Just to show you where we came in, our total, what they call all-in costs under a tax-free basis is 2.57%. So even with our triple B negative rating with a negative outlook, we were still able to get these bonds financed at 2.57%. Now, this sheet that I've handed out to you is a write-up that Bank of America does with all of the bonds that they refund. And you can see the amounts that they were able to, over on the right-hand side in this section right here, the amounts they were able to finance. It has a 5% coupon, but there's obviously a premium because it's a 5% coupon. If you look all the way over to the far right, you can see the 2021, which is due 1 year from now, has a yield on it of 1.13%, goes all the way up to 2.92%, 10 or 15 years from now. Now, these bonds are refundable also, are callable 10 years from now. And so we may end up at some point, if we're in a position to do so, and it would be advantageous to refund them 10 years from now like we did these. But very good deal. This is sort of the technical thing. The fact that they were GO or government obligation bonds helped us. If you look down here in the very bottom part, you'll see that when they took this to market, they had 4 times the orders than the $33 million. So they had orders for $120 million worth of our bonds, and they had to go back and allocate amongst all the people they're wanting to buy. In doing so, they were able to drive down their interest rates some more. So it was a good thing. Russell, do you want to add a couple of things to this?
Yeah, we knew it was going to take some divine intervention in this deal to get it done, and we had it. Because if you remember, the bond market was pretty steady in January and February, and then it crashed in March to the point where Doug had called us and said, we thought this year was dead in the water. And then it recovered, and not only did it recover well, but actually the savings are going to end up being very much good for us. That it's this $7 million savings will probably grow, but at the same time, we're able to get this done, get rid of the cash covenants, and ultimately save the taxpayer a bunch of money over the next 10 years. So it's done, and it's a successful case study, and we're very blessed that we were able to get this handled. So mark that one for the big guys.
Get rid of the covers, that makes such a,
Oh, yeah.
that's such a relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Even though the day we sold the bonds, our covenant was probably pretty weak. I think we were on it.
We were.
The day we sold them.
Yeah, but still.
But still.
You don't have to worry about that every month.
Well, this year we don't, and then next year, as I said, it went up to 100 days.
I know.
And there had just been, we might, I shouldn't say might, it would have been a stretch then,
Yeah.
but we would have been putting money in the bank when we really need to be putting money into capital expenditures.
Yeah.
And so by getting this refunded and getting those covenants taken off, it actually allows us to use the money that we make to the benefit of this organization as opposed to putting it in the bank for some lender's security. So we're very pleased. I lead with this simply because it will be necessary as we get into the operating budget to talk about that and the cash flows. So, but before we get into the operating budget, what I want to do is talk about the ad valorem tax calculation that we're going to have to go through. And I hope your eyes will not go cross. I suspect they will as I go through these numbers. I've had to go through it several times. I had to go in and talk to Russell, and we bounced numbers off just to make sure that we were saying it properly. But just to give you an idea of the complication or how complicated this thing is, if you wanted to, I could share this massive schedule that we have to fill out, and it's used under the new truth and taxation to come to this. What I've done is try to extract what I believe are the relevant numbers out of this to walk you through this, because I think it's important to understand the interaction we have between property tax and sales tax and how it really can mess up how we think about just the ad valorem tax, which is in here. So we're explaining how we're coming to the rate that I'm going to propose to the board, or Russell and I are going to propose to the board. At next Tuesday's board meeting, we will have to take a vote among all the directors whether they are against or for this rate increase, and that will go into the public notice that we have to post for the hearings that will happen a week after that, and then on the 17th when you actually vote for it. So next Tuesday is what we start this whole process, and you have to go on record as to whether you're for or against the rate increase that's being proposed. It's not an actual vote for, it's just you're proposing for us to put this out into the public. So with that, I want to walk through these next 3 slides, and I will try to keep it as painless as possible, but it won't be, because it was painful just trying to do all this. But let's just start with where we had last year. We had $16,135 million worth of taxable property value, and that's sort of the starting point. We always go back to last year at that. And we had an adopted rate last year per hundred of 11.272 cents. Now that generated a property tax levy of $18,187,000. Now, if we look at where our 2020 taxable property value came in this year, it's at $15,967,114,000, or it's about a 1% decline from prior year. Now, this is just looking at existing property in 2019 that was assessed in 2020. It doesn't include any new property, it's just the value of that property. So that property has gone down 1%. So under the new language that's in the Truth in Taxation, they use this new acronym NNR, which means no new revenue rate. And so our 11.272 would go to 11.4092 to generate the same $18 million in property tax assessment. Now, everything would be real simple if we just stopped right there and we didn't have any sales tax, but we don't. So this is where it starts getting complicated. So again, we start with the no new revenue tax rate of 11.4 cents. And we say, all right, we're going to have, that's what we levy, 18 million. Now we look at 2019's sales tax that when all this was set up was said, we're going to use sales tax as a way to offset the ad valorem taxes. So we collected in 2019, which was the peak of the oil boom, all right, in this cycle, $56 million. So we had a total available market, or total funds available to this organization for 2019, what we call maintenance and operating, M&O, of $74 million, $74,507,000. Now that's what we're really trying to come back and achieve the same no new revenue. So it's the $74,507,000 that we're trying to achieve. So if we were to use the property that we currently have available, the $15 billion, it would create a 46.78 cents M&O tax rate. So right now we're assessing 11, but because we get the benefit of sales tax, if we didn't get that benefit, we would really need to assess 46.78 cents against ad valorem. All right. Now the law allows us to go up 8% a year as a hospital district. The new Truth in Taxation allows us to go up 8% without having to go back to the voters. Anything above an 8% has to go to the voters for an up or down vote, meaning, so we could go all the way up to 50.5 cents, all right, before we would have to go to the public for a vote. Now, to that, since we now have gone through these bonds and had them transferred from a revenue bond to a GO bond or government obligation bond, we're able to add to our ad valorem the 2.1 cents, which represents our debt service for the next 10 years. So we would have an effective M&O rate of 52.65%. All right? Now I'm gonna stop right there and make sure everybody, any questions before I get, this is where it gets really complicated. But in essence, we're saying to get to $74 million worth of taxes in combination between ad valorem and sales tax, we would have to have an ad valorem tax only of 52.65 cents per hundred. All right? So starting with that number, we come back and say, now we got to come back and say, what are we truly going to assess? Well, in this case, we have to look at what our sales tax were in the most recent 12-month time period. We call that 2020, all right? Well, 2020, we collected $47 million, which is $9.2 million less than the calculated time period, the previous 12 months. So when you take and convert that into a rate adjustment, that means off of the 52 cents, putting back or taking off of that the sales tax that we collected, it would mean we'd have to make an adjustment to this 52 cents of 29 cents, which would bring us to a voter-approved tax rate of 23.58% or cents, right? So that's what we should be assessing on ad valorem after we take out the sales tax adjustment. And what makes this so screwy, how we go from 11 cents to 23 cents, is the fact that we had sales tax go up significantly and then fall significantly during the subsequent 12 months. And we're probably going to have it fall again, which means it's going to be, we're still not going to get to that $74 million we collected. But we should be able to assess under the no new revenue or the 8%, no new revenue plus 8%, a 23.58 cent, 23.58 per hundred rate. All right. But because the hospital district is limited to 15 cents, all we can do is 15 cents of this 23. So when we vote next week, it will be on a 15-cent rate, which includes the 2.1 cents for the INS or the bond, and about 13 cents for M&O. All right. We should, though, be at 23 cents. What does that mean to the hospital district? That means we're unable to tax $13.9 million because of this tax ceiling limit right here. Now, that's important. I think Russell wants to talk a little bit about this. That's important because if at some point our sales tax goes up, and up, we may fall below the 15 cents at some point. But right now, just to try to get back to the same level of funding we had in the 2019 time period, we're unable to do that because we can't get to 23 cents. We can only get to 15. And that's almost a $14 million shortfall that we're going to have to end up basically going without as we look at our tax support. Russell, do you want to?
Yeah, so the caveat of this is, and the thought was that the sales tax and the ad valorem tax would never decrease so dramatically at the same time. One of them was always going to offset the other. And then, of course, we all know what's happened. We've experienced a decline in both at the same time. So now with the cap, we can't raise our tax rate fast enough or high enough to offset the sales tax collapse. Vice versa, you can't raise the sales tax fast enough to offset the ad valorem tax. So the point with this is, we're gonna be at 15 cents, we're gonna be capped. In 2 years, so next year, you can probably say the rate will probably go down again. The year after that is probably a projected turnaround. But the point is, when you start getting, that number starts coming down, when you like get to the year where you could be at 12 cents instead of 15 cents, we need to hold steady at the 15 to make up for the years that we're gonna lose on the cap. And that's gonna be difficult. It's gonna take a lot of legwork in the community, which is what you have me here for. We'll start working on that today, preparing for the future, year or 2 years down the road. Because you can see, we should be almost at 24 cents, and that's at a no new revenue rate. And so the cap has really got us, it's capped. I mean, what else can you say? It's capped. On the ad valorem tax, on the sales tax side, I'm bullish on the sales tax. I think that things start picking up and people realize that we're gonna be okay. They'll start spending money again. Stores are open, things are happening, but that's just gonna take time to recover. But at the same time, the day that was thought would never happen is upon us. And the budget we created has got this in it. So the budget we created is at 15 cents. The sales tax assumption, I guess, is at 47 million, give or take a little bit there. So if we get into the budget year and the sales tax is better than what we thought, it'll be fine. If it's worse than what we thought, we're calculated on a $47 million number. So we will have to manage that through the year. But I think what we need to prepare for is not this coming year, but it's the year after. Because if the ad valorem tax, if the ad valorem value continues to fall, we can't raise our rate anymore. We're stuck. So so I guess the point is, we need to go out and spend some money and buy some clothes and get that sales tax rate back up. But it's been very difficult to try to explain this to people. It's been very difficult to think that a 23 cent rate would generate the same as 11 cents generated last year. That shows you the gap. So just be prepared for that. But this budget is created on a 15 cent cap, so it's on.
All right.
Any question about that?
I know it made my head swim. If you've got any questions, come see me. But we will be looking at a 15-cent rate that we'll vote on next Tuesday.
One more thing about the rate. I'm sorry. Sorry, Steve. Just so you know, on the rate, we'll get at this a little more. Even though it's going up from 11 to 15, it's not going to require any public hearings other than the proposal. Because even though we're up, we're so far into the rollback rate that we're not going to have to, it's not going to qualify us for any of those public hearings or public meetings, because even though we're up, we're still, 23 from 15, we're that far under the rollback rate. So even though it's going to be seen as an increase in your tax rate, it's actually, it could be considered a $14 million decrease because of where we would have been at the 23 cents. So, but it's not going to force us into any public hearings or anything like that. But, so when your constituents talk to you about, well, you're raising my tax, I should have the right to come in. And we have one meeting to propose it, but it's not going to call for these other public meetings. So there's anything on the upside to it. It's going to make less meetings for us, but at the same time, it's going to cost us about $14 million. Sorry.
Well, just to get this out there, this 15-cent rate was a Edgar County tax, and there was good old boy conversation back when the district was established, and Edgar County said, well, we can give you this 15-cent rate. They now want back. They've asked for it back before. I don't guess they come here and say, give me my money back. I've had that conversation with them, that they need that money back. But the normal hospital system was run at 70 cents, right?
75.
75.
Harris County, Tarrant County, they're 75 cents.
And this could be changed with a vote. Now, I personally think we need to have that conversation.
Does it need a vote or legislative?
Yeah,
Oh.
legislative action.
Yeah, the voters would determine the legislative action.
Yeah.
So you're right. So the county, every county in the state of Texas has a 75-cent cap. Every county has 60-cent cap because the 15 came to the hospital district. But every hospital district also has a 75% cap. And it is, that is in our creation document. So you're right, it would take a vote by the voters to put that, so it'd probably be two, to increase ours to 75 and move that 15 back over the county and put those 75.
Yeah.
It'd probably take two votes to make that.
Yeah.
And then a legislative rewrite. But that is compensation.
Well, I mean, if that were to happen, then the county would pick up what they wanted, that they gave away, and we could get back to the business that we need to be at. We're doing the same work every other hospital, wherever.
I can't.
I think we need to move that
We're sharing
direction.
that
We need to have that
And
conversation.
Can you?
When we talked before, you know, you put up what every other county in Texas has compared to what we have, it just doesn't make sense. And it goes back to what Don said, that, you know, good old boy deal making 30 years ago is what got us where we are.
I can tell you this too. Most districts enjoy 75 cents and the sales tax.
Yeah.
Both of them. So think about that too. I mean, that they both, because the unfunded mandates and being the county hospital, the unfunded patients we serve, that sales tax and the 75-cent tax rate are, it's not uncommon. In fact, it's very common to happen. So
I just wanted that on the record out there. We need to have that conversation.
Of course, the county wanted to get rid of the hospital so bad because if we keep losing money, the hospital's gonna close.
Yeah.
If we hadn't created a district, medical center would no longer be,
that's very true.
no longer be here.
Were you in that conversation 30 years ago?
My wife worked here 30 years. She worked here in the 70s.
So she knows, she remembers what it is.
Oh,
Mary
yeah.
Lou's shaking her head.
I remember.
All right, so let me just sort of start with when we start talking about budgets, I think it's important as an organization to understand where the money goes. I mean, whatever we do make, it has to go somewhere. And I try to break things down as simple as possible to think about where the money goes when we do make it, all right? We've had some difficult years and not made it. But if you look at what we're basing our budget on for this next year, we've got what we call cash requirements. And the first one is debt service. And with the new bonds that we have, we're gonna have debt service of roughly $3,250,000 a year. So yes, that's now going to be funded by a portion of the ad valorem tax, but the ad valorem tax is all still part of our budget. So it goes into the pot altogether. So we've got to at least get $3.2 million worth of cash to be able to pay for our debt service. Now, we've used as sort of a placeholder for the last 2 years of the two times I've presented to you, a capital expenditure number of $15 million. Now, we've all talked about previously us going through the Cerner conversion and the fact that the organization didn't spend the money on normal capital expenditures, that over a 5-year window, we're really behind on our what I call routine capital expenditures. Now, just as a way of giving you an indicator, we've roughly had $18.5 million worth of depreciation expense in the last 2 years in our fiscal years. Now, what does that mean? From an accounting perspective, you're supposed to expense, when you buy an asset, you're supposed to expense it over its useful life at a equal amount every year. So if I have a $300 surgical device that has a 3-year life, I'm going to expense $100 a year to write that out over 3 years. So depreciation expense is a good marker for how much utilization of our assets we're doing every year. And we're utilizing our assets at roughly $18.5 million a year. Now, that number used to be upwards of $21 million a year, but as we've not put capital back in, it's come down. And so we're in the $18.5 million range. Well, we're not even replacing our equipment at a $15 million mark at what we're utilizing it. So I want everybody to understand, even at $15 million, thinking that's a lot of money to spend capital-wise, we're still not replacing our equipment at the rate that we're using it. Now, as a benchmark, if you go out and you look at what I consider healthy healthcare organizations, typically they will budget anywhere between 110 and 150%, based upon how well they're doing, 110 to 150% of their annual depreciation expense as a way of not only reinvesting, but also continually trying to improve. So that's a future target when we start thinking about capital expenditures. At some point, when we start making more money, we got to get this number up into the $20 to $25 million range just to be forward spending on our capital reinvestment program. So we need at least $15 million worth of earnings or cash flow to come in for next year. And then what I call cash to the bank or savings for what I call rainy day. I'm just going to put a number out there, $4.5 million. Now, it's hard to project where we're going to end up days cash on hand, but I think we're going to be somewhere in the 50 to 60 days cash on hand range when we get to the end of September in that October time period. It's hard to say, it's just where we're still trending right now. But at $1 million a day cost to this organization, that's only 4.5 days we're putting into the bank. So you put all that together, basically what we're saying is we need to be able to generate cash flow of $22.7 million just to be able to properly finance this organization next year. Now, obviously, if we don't make 22.7, this number is not going to happen, all right? In fact, we may end up taking some money out of the bank for dollars that we don't make, which is what we did in previous years. I mean, before we started the Cerner conversion, we were 110 days. Then we had those 3 or 4 years, and also the oil bust. We went through about 50 days worth of cash. We got down to a low of 40 days cash on hand. Then it got built back up to about 60. But roughly, we need to be in that $22 to $23 million range, just as what I call a bare minimum to be able to do what we got to do, all right? So that's a baseline when we start looking at how to create a budget for next year. All right, now let's get some.
Real quick, before on that last slide, I have a question.
Yeah.
For us being a nonprofit, what does it mean for the depreciation? I mean, are we getting that cash back because we're depreciating that? Is that the cash that why do we have to report, if we're a nonprofit, the depreciation? How do we claim the file?
There are no it doesn't, depreciation in a not-for-profit, you don't get a tax benefit for it, okay? But from an accounting standards perspective, which we have to report under GASB and under FASB, we have to be able to keep our financial statements accurately stated like everybody else. Okay. And so we have to record depreciation expense at those standards.
So with that being said, since we're in an environment of the COVID and all healthcare systems are kind of taking on these hits, why aren't we taking an accelerated depreciation on that equipment in a shorter amount of time to get over this hump so that our financials reflect that?
Well, first off, accelerated depreciation is a tax tactic. Mm-hmm. And since we don't pay taxes, there isn't a accelerated tax schedule. So if we were in a for-profit organization, like your business, you're going to have what's called book tax, or book depreciation, which is what this $18.5 million is, and you're gonna have a tax depreciation schedule, which most likely will be an accelerated depreciation, so that you could avoid taxes and thereby use those monies early on to help build. I mean, that's the whole reason they give you, the tax law allows you to have accelerated depreciation. But for our perspective, we don't pay taxes, so there's no need to have an accelerated tax depreciation schedule. We have to state our financial statements at book depreciation just to be able to keep them comparable with Midland Memorial or Harris County or whatever, any of those others.
Okay,
All right?
understood.
So I throw that up there, Ben, only as a means to give us a marker for how much our capital expenditures need to be. If we don't know what a reasonable number should be, someone may say, well, you only need to spend $5 million a year. Well, you've got to have some kind of basis as to come to a value judgment. And what the industry has tried to do is to invest at the rate in which they're using, and preferably, if you're financially sound, you invest at a higher rate as a way of continually improving the organization, thereby hopefully also allowing you to expand services and or provide nicer services to the patients that you are serving. So that's just as a marker to give us a baseline of where we think we need to be investing capital-wise.
Does the capital expenditure add to our asset column?
It does, but at the same time, depreciation takes away. So you put it in, and then you also have to depreciate it. So that's why we look at our fixed assets at a net depreciated value. And I want to say, Grant, I mean, we're what, at like $170 million. I think that's about where we are in net value on our depreciated assets. Another way in which people talk about it, what was the calculated age at the last calculation? Do you recall, Grant? I want to say it was 16.2 years.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Between 16 and 17.
Yeah. So our average age of everything, average age on a weighted basis is 16 years. When we started this whole venture back before the decline back in the 14-15, the average age was 10 years. You look at other organizations, they try to stay in that 8 to 9 year average age. So, I mean, the whole point of this discussion is to realize we need to spend at least 15. If we make a whole lot more money, the executive team is going to be coming saying, can we spend 20, 22 million? Because realistically, we need to be able to make up for those deficits in years we didn't. Now, when we present to you the official budget later in September, we're going to talk about creating a 3-year capital budget after this budget cycle, starting in October, and hopefully bringing to the board in the January or February time period, in which we can create a 3-year rolling capital assignment so that the board has an idea of what our true demands are. But in lack of having a very strategic capital replacement plan put together, the best marker is to look at what we spent depreciation-wise and try to get at least that much money into the budget for capital expenditure for the next year. Okay? So,
Have you been taking some accounting classes?
A lot of them.
well, let me school you just a little bit more, because I want to use some phrases just to educate everybody, so we understand when I throw out this word EBITDA, what it really means. It's an acronym that stands earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. In the for-profit world, it's EBITDA, which includes taxes in it. But since we don't pay taxes, EBITDA, though, is another way of saying cash flow from operations. How much money does this organization generate to be able to do this? we've got to generate cash flow to be able to do $22.7 million. So I use the phrase EBITDA, which is this earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. It's just another fancy way of saying cash flow from the organization. Now, things that are considered expense items that have a non-cash component to them, meaning depreciation and amortization. Those are general accounting standards in which we have to expense something, but it isn't actual dollars that have gone out. The dollars go out when we actually buy the equipment. Then we amortize it over its life. That amortization is a non-cash item. And then under GASB 68, which is our pension, a portion of our pension expense is considered non-cash. We're going to contribute a certain amount every year, and then there's a portion we have to expense that is non-cash. Now, those two are the major items that make up the difference between what's called EBITDA and net change in assets. So when you look at our financial statements, at the very bottom of the income statement, it says net change in assets. That's another word for net income, all right? Net income and EBITDA are not the same. The big difference between the two, the reconciling items, are these two non-cash items, depreciation and amortization. So I look at operations without these two items in it. Cash in, cash out is sort of what we're going to be looking at here on this next schedule, all right? So before I get into actual dollars in, dollars out, just sort of look at where our current budget from a volume perspective is going to be. And this is really interesting because we're in interesting times with COVID. We've taken a significant volume hit across all of our service lines from the March to current date. We're still not where we need to be or where we would want to be. Now, it's coming back, but it's still not where it was last year, and it definitely isn't with the rate increase. So when you look at where we were in 2019, we were at $1.3 billion in gross patient revenue. All right, this includes the hospital and ProCare. We generated $1.3 billion in billings. Now, the budget as we currently are developing has us at $1.2 billion in gross billings, and that's a 7% decline to 2019. So we're not even, in our budget right now, we're not even going to be at our 2019 actual level. In fact, you can see where we're forecasting with 9 months actual and 3 months projected. We're projecting that we're going to come in at $1.1 billion in gross patient billings. Now, our budget has a 5% increase off of this number right here. So we are looking at about a 5% increase in total business from the low numbers we have in 2020, but we're still not going to be at 2019's level. So we've got some work to do, all right, just to get back to 2019. That's how much COVID has impacted our organization, all right? Now you start thinking about it. Now this isn't net patient billing, but this right here normalizes our business model. We have no rate increases we've put into either one of these numbers. So this 1.2 billion is comparable to this 1.3. We haven't done any rate increases. So we're still going to be 7% behind last year, 2019's numbers. Now from an admissions perspective, we've got budgeted 13,410 admissions, which would be an 8% increase over our current year run rate, but it'll be a 5% decline from 2019. ER visits, this is very interesting because as we look at where we're standing now, ER is probably the one service line that has not come back to anywhere near our previous levels. And I think that's simply because the minor stuff is avoiding the ER. And what we're seeing is truly emergent and urgent, true urgent type visits. I mean, it's a significant hit. Even with us putting in where we think we're going to be, we're still 9% below what we are running at for 2020. And when you compare it to 2019, we're 21% off of that number. I mean, that's a significant decline, especially when you consider that the ER historically has been the front door to all of our admissions coming into this organization. So this is an area of concern. We've been able, and if we go back and look at where we were ER visits, we've been trending anywhere from 2 to 5% year over year, very steady for the last several years. And so this is a significant decline. Outpatient visits, excluding ER, you can see we're not looking at building much, only a 1% increase on the hospital side in ER visits. And we're still going to be 6.7% behind 2019. Surgeries, we are looking at a 13% increase over the existing year, but you got to remember, I mean, we basically shut down in the month of April, the month of June, and the month of July. I mean, we probably lost 2 full months worth of volume. And so this looks like a nice increase, but the reality of it is it's still 9% off of 2019, and it's below what I consider a threshold of 10,000 surgeries a year. This is one of our profitable service lines across all surgeries. So this is of concern to us as we look at our revenue. Deliveries, now this is one that we continue, and to be honest, deliveries have not been impacted by COVID. We continue to be very strong with that. And quite honestly, we probably haven't factored in the bump that we're going to see in the November, December, January time period. But we're at 2169, which is a slight increase over this. And it's a 6% increase over 2019. So this is the only line of all of these top lines that we're seeing year-over-year increases. And then from a ProCare perspective, again, remember, they were basically shut down those 3 or 4 months. We're looking at 112,000 ProCare visits. It's a 6% increase over prior year. It's still a 5.7 decline over 2019. So you put all that into the mix, and you can see, yeah, we have a slight increase in gross revenue, but we're still behind where we were in 2019. That's tough, because when you start thinking about where's our cost structure have to be, when you're 7% off of where you historically have been, that's an issue. So let's look at our projections for 2021. Now, what we're looking at are when we factor in where our contractuals are, not looking at any real net revenue cycle improvements, we're at $247 million in net patient revenue on a consolidated basis. That is a 5% increase from where we think we're going to be this year, but look at that, it's a 9% decline from 2019. That is a significant, I mean, that's $25 million in net revenue that we aren't going to have. Now, our Medicaid supplemental funding, we did very well this year. And part of that is just some of the advanced funding that came with COVID. You can see this is the year we took the hit in that. We're forecasting about a 10% decline in that at this point. We would hope that maybe as HHS comes back and does some more, we would see that, but we're not going to budget any more than $28 million. When we look at our tax revenues using the 15-cent rate and where we anticipate our sales tax actually coming in at, we think we're going to be right at $62 million. That is a slight increase from this, but it's down from this 69 million here. And other revenues are going to be slightly down. Now, this $33 million in other revenue includes the $26 million that we've received from the CARES grant. We don't have to pay that back. That's meant to be an offset to this number right here that's gone down so significant from 2019. So when we look at this, our total operating revenues are going to be $347 million, which is still a decline from this number, which includes the CARES grant, and a significant decline from this number right here. So we're having to create a budget. That's why it's taken us a little bit extra time, because we're talking about a significant decline here from 370 million in operating revenues to 347, and trying to come up with an EBITDA number that's greater than $23 million. So to do that, we're looking at currently, and these numbers right here, I would tell you, will change when we present the final budget September 17th. But as we stand here today, we're looking at roughly $173 million in salary, wages, contract labor, and benefits. All right? That is a decline from our 20 run rate of 186 and $188 million. So the furloughs that we did, the permanent furloughs that we did, the additional squeezing of productivity numbers that we're still currently working through has resulted in us being able to go from $188 million down to $173 million. That's a significant decline in net payroll expense. It's needed because we're going down here in operating revenues. And we're still continuing trying to shave this. We're still haven't gone through what I call the gnashing of teeth. All of the directors have pretty much worked through what they consider the labor budgets. Over the next 2 weeks or so, that's when Russell and I will be sitting down with the executive team and finalizing everybody's labor budget. In addition, we've come back in and all the directors have worked through their purchase services and professional fees. And the work that we've done there has resulted in us being able to look at a budget of $73 million compared to 103 where we were right there. That is a significant decline, but I mean, we've had to scratch and scratch and scratch to get to that number, all right? Our supplies, we expect to go up from here, and up also, because we believe as we start building volume, we will see an increase in supplies. Not sure where that's coming from.
Somebody needs to mute their phone.
So we're looking at roughly total cash expenses of $324 million versus 344 this year and 367 million in 2019. If we can get budgets put together that approximate these numbers, we will come in with an operating EBITDA or operating cash flow of $23.7 million. That is the bare bones. That's why we're going to be, I mean, you've heard Russell talk about, and Russell said constantly in all of our executive and directors meetings, we're going to have to scratch and scratch and scratch to get to where we need to be. When you have this large of a decline, 370 million down to 347 million dollars in revenues, for us to get to $23 million, we cannot.
Steve, hold on one second. That's really distracting. I can't hear what you're
Can we
saying.
pause?
Let me switch over.
efficient or? is there
Well,
probably-
again, later on, when we talk about strategic initiatives and what we do, I had hoped that within this year, we've been able to see some revenue cycle improvements, significant ones, somewhere in the 10, 15, $20 million. We've not realized that. We've had some good things come with the Cerner RevWorks, but to be quite honest, we've had a whole lot of hits to the point that they are not performing to the level of expectation that was given them a year ago when we made that decision. And we're in constant discussions with them about how to improve that. Cerner RevWorks was acquired by another company, a larger company. So supposedly they tell me that it's going to be a better deal for us, but that's yet to be seen.
That's what they say every time.
That's what they say. They'll be here in early September to do a face-to-face with us, and we're going to have some rather interesting conversations about performance. Because as I calculated, we've gone backwards in many areas, not forwards. So this number, this 247 at this point, does not include any revenue cycle true improvements. I would hope we'd be able to realize some, but at this point, I'm not willing to put that on paper simply because I'm not assured that that's going to happen.
Even a 5 or 10% improvement.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's fantastic.
We'd have a parade downtown.
Yes. Yes. And we should. We honestly should. We've got those much opportunities out there, but there are things that have to happen in the background that currently are not happening. And I mean, as I said, I'm in constant conversation with them about how to change it. And there's some things that Russell and Steve, lawyer Steve and I are talking about also in regards to this. That's really all I can say at this point.
I don't know, the Cerner contract is 700 pages long. We don't see, ever seen it?
No,
700 pages.
it takes you a month to read because it puts you to sleep.
Or font.
If you have trouble sleeping, just start reading the pages.
So I've got some other things I want to talk to y'all about when we go into executive session, but this right here is the bones, the structure of what our fiscal 21 budget will be looking like. And we'll spend the next 3 weeks working the executive team with the directors to get that finalized for a presentation in mid-September for your approval. All right? That's all I have, Chairman, at this point.
Well, I appreciate you always giving us the real numbers. That makes a big difference. Well, good, I appreciate it.
So with that, I think we've got some other items on the agenda, and they're basically setting of dates. Russell, do you want to work through this, or do you want to talk about
Let me
Okay.
work through it, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Let me just, a couple of quick comments about that. First of all, when me and y'all started talking as a group last year, one of the things that we were committed to, both of us, was honest, no smoke and mirrors budget. Give us the good numbers and give us solid information. And then COVID came along, and it just made those numbers even more real. I mean, this is real as it gets. Let me tell you this. All the credit for this budget right here goes to Steve and his team. They have worked tirelessly to get this right side up. And I think what you need to enjoy the most about this is it's investing money back into this building that we have to have. This is just day-to-day equipment. You talk about CT scanners and surgery sterilizers like the one we had that went down last night. This just puts us back to par. And then if you want to get better than that, we have to perform better than this. People ask me all the time, well, I know y'all get bonus payments for the COVID patients, and you get, how y'all hear that noise too. And honestly, what you're talking about here is this company generates over $1 billion a year in charges, over $1 billion. And it's not enough. $1.5 billion is not enough. But you have a budget here in front of us today that I hope you have confidence in that these numbers are as honest and as true up as we can get them. Steve and Grant, and we have a new intern, Austin here, who's the spreadsheet wizard. That has worked us over with these spreadsheets, and that we have brought a budget to y'all that is as tight as we can get our budget. It's working off of a capped rate of 15 cents, that is still, it protects the company, it protects the taxpayer, and it protects our patients and our employees. And I think that's what we want to do. So what we have in front of us here today is these next several just set time and dates. Again, we will not have to have the 2 public hearings because the rate is under the rollback. So that will not be required, but I guess we just need to walk through these one at a time, take a record of votes and set these, and then get these ready, get them on y'all's calendar so we can get these done. We have strategically put these out via the truth and taxation number of days when we post it in the paper, number of days when we had the first hearing, so there are some very strict rules. So if we can, let's start with the first one. So the proposed ad valorem tax rate for the budget year, we're gonna propose 15 cents.
Right.
Okay. And so our proposal to this board would be for us to set the ad valorem tax rate at a cap at 15 cents.
You want to vote on that one, man?
We have that set to vote next Tuesday.
Okay.
We just presented the numbers so that y'all will be ready. But you have to go on record next Tuesday.
At the board meeting, if so, when you leave out here, somebody says, what are y'all proposing? It's 15 cents, okay? All right, then if required, set the time and date for 2 public hearings. We do not have to have those. We can skip that, correct? We need one.
We have one.
Okay, we need to set that one for,
September the 10th.
yes. You have that sheet?
You have it?
Sorry, I shut it off. So we need to have a, let's see, September, the board meeting is on Tuesday. And we need to have a public hearing? One of the public hearings.
Yeah.
It has to be 10 days after.
10 days before the actual vote. So we have to post a notice in the paper, which we're proposing to do on September the 3rd.
So then 10 days after that,
7 days after that,
it would be 19.
we're going to do a public hearing.
So what does 9/10 look like for y'all? Does that look good for y'all?
What time?
What day of the week is
That's
that?
Thursday. Need to do that for the public can come, because you do it too early, you hear a lot of complaints from people.
I'd probably say at 5 or 5:30.
Yeah.
That's
That's
it.
it.
10.
5:30, and that meeting, if nobody shows up, will be about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, 5:30 on the 10th, okay? So, we need action on that one, probably.
Yes.
So, take a motion on September 10th, 5:30.
I'm gonna make a motion.
On a motion in a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries.
Okay, this one says, set time, date, and place for public hearing to accept comments from the public on the proposed fiscal year operating capital budget, and that can be the same date as the next one, correct? Set time and date and place for approve the proposed budget?
We're setting that now, and that's going to be the September 17th day.
Okay, so 9/17, what day of the week is that?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Thursday? Yeah, that's for that.
What time?
Well, 3.
We want to do, what time do we want to do? Do we want to do a 5:30 on it?
So now that one's going to be that's where we'll present the full budget.
Oh, okay.
So it'll probably be about a 2-hour meeting.
All right, so we need to try that at 3 o'clock.
Hope I make it.
Go ahead.
So 3 p.m. on the 17th, and that will be the time and date and place for the public hearing and to approve the budget. So that'll be number 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6.
5 and 6,
And 7, right?
And 7, yeah.
oh, and so,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion for a date of 9/17 at 3 p.m.
Make a motion.
I'll say.
Motion and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries.
Okay, now back up just a little bit. So on Tuesday, we'll get everything done at the regular board meeting. On 9/3, we're gonna post the proposed rate in the newspaper. We have to wait 7 days, so that'll take us to the 10th, which at 5:30, we'll have our one and only public hearing. We have to wait 7 days after that one, which will be 9/17, in which we'll, on the 17th, we will accept any more comments, we'll approve the budget and set the tax rate, all at the same time.
I don't think we have to set any more public,
No.
public comments.
Just the,
That one
just
time,
one time,
on the 10th.
Mhm.
And on the 17th, we just,
you vote for it.
then go ahead and do the going rate same night.
So we'll knock all those out. So the next, that's gonna be 1, 2, 3 meetings in the next 2.5 weeks. So we'll knock that out. But the 17th, wear some comfort shoes because we'll be here a couple hours just walking all the way through.
I wanted it dropped.
If that becomes available, we'll start emailing that out to you so you can see it beforehand. So, we will get that done. Any questions about any of that? Steve, anything else?
Listen, thank you.
I think that concludes our presentation on next year's budget.
Consider proposal to transition accrediting bodies.
We have a lady here that's going to speak to us. We have been talking about a move from our joint commission status and accreditation to DMV. And Ms. Courtney is here and she will talk to you about that. And we will give you a recommendation. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning.
So I'm Courtney, many of you know me as the Director of Patient Experience, and today serving you as our interim Chief Experience Officer. And so I want to walk you through our proposal this morning. Many of you know better. All right, I'll try to talk loud. There we go.
Better.
Many of you know that we are with the Joint Commission right now. That's who we are in contract with. Who we are proposing moving to is the DMV. Most of the time I want to spend this morning is around why we want to transition. So the first difference between the Joint Commission and the DMV is that the Joint Commission comes every 3 years. So year 1, year 4, 7, etc. DMV actually comes those same accreditation years, and then they come every year in between for a focus survey. So the main difference is in that partnership, you're getting a survey every single year versus the survey every 3 years. One of the things Russell and I talked about was that with the Joint Commission, it's so easy to get into that mindset where you don't think about it until you're coming up again on that next 3 years. And so as we journey towards an always ready mentality, the DNB really supports us in that journey. The next thing I want to share is the Congress accreditation report. They put one out every year. In this report, they talk about who is most aligned with CMS. DNB has come out on top of that report every year. Moving down to the lowest disparity rate on this slide, when you look at CMS, what they do is they take a sample size of accrediting organizations. So if you look at DNB and the Joint Commission, they'll come in and they'll survey those hospitals, and then they will look and see how many more findings are we finding than the actual accrediting body is finding. And so when you look at Joint Commission, they typically find about 40 to 45% more findings with Joint Commission. With the DNB, they actually only find 20% more findings. So I think that really tells you a lot about DNB and the quality of having that survey every single year and that partnership. The DNB has actually been accredited for the next 4 years. It's very uncommon for an accrediting survey organization to be accredited less than that. The Joint Commission has recently only been approved for the next 2. When you look at our region, we're probably one of the last, if not the last, to actually transition to the DNB. Many of the partners and organizations around us are already with the DNB for the survey process. Unlike the Joint Commission, their surveyors are full-time employees, and so they survey 50 weeks out of the entire year. Joint Commission actually has people who partner with and come in and pick up a couple of surveys every year. The Joint Commission doesn't have a huge support and partnership with us. We kind of just see them every 3 years. The DNV actually provides us with ongoing support, and because their surveys are actually, or surveyors, excuse me, are actually performing surveys year round, they get to see the best practices and they get to see all the things that other organizations are doing and collaborate with us in those 2 off years to make sure that we're at the best that we can be at, to make sure that we're providing the best quality of care. So DNV was at Permian Regional, and I know Russell is a seasoned veteran with them. Is there anything you'd like to add about DNV?
The Joint Commission has been around for a long, long time. I'm sure more, I've sat through many of those trainings, and it does seem there is a shift to get away from the make your poster board, be ready in 3 years, to we are going to drill this all the time and keep the standard high instead of just picking it up every 1 to 3 years. So it does make a difference in not being to have somebody consistently in here instead of us dusting off the policy and procedure book once every 3 years and then getting through a survey and putting it back on the shelf and waiting for 3 more. I have had good success with them. All of our partners, Odessa Regional and Midland Memorial, are both in the DFV family. And so you're correct, we will be one of the, if not the last in this area to transition over that. I will tell you one thing that's interesting as well, is that some people are dropping accreditation surveys totally. They're just going back to the CMS guidelines, which to me, a CMS guideline is a base standard. A DMV standard is that plus expectation on top of that. So we definitely want to keep a higher level of safety and patient care and just overall performance. And I think DMV would be a good one.
And the next thing I want to do is kind of get down to the nitty gritty and share some numbers with you all. So at the top is C Joint Commission. We pay $13,000 annually to partner with them. We pay an additional $32,000 on a survey accreditation year. And for CIHQ, which is down at the bottom, they are another accrediting organization that we utilize. We utilize them as a consultant and resource group. We pay $3,000 a year. And then in between the 2 years that we're not being surveyed, we ask them to come in and provide a mock survey for us at a cost of $25,000. So if you look at the cost of Joint Commission and CIHQ, what we're proposing is to actually cut ties with both of those organizations and pick up DNV, which actually puts us right about even. So in year 1, we'll be spending about $44,000 for that accrediting survey. And then year 2 and 3, not only will we have that partnership and collaboration, but we'll also have their on-site survey teams as well, keeping us ready for our next accreditation survey. Any questions at all?
So we're gonna pay a couple things. So whenever we change over from JCO, I guess, to DNV, do you anticipate any problems with reimbursement? Seeing that's you know, there's a lot that goes into CMS and the documentation and just all the forms and
Yeah, that's a good question. So for Joint Commission, what we're proposed to do is if this gets approved, we'll go to Joint Commission and we'll let them know that we'll be transitioning accrediting bodies. Typically, accrediting organizations work together to make sure that they come in during our same window time, and DNV has committed to us that if we make that transition, they will come in at the same survey window that we have with the Joint Commission and redo our accreditation through them. There is a chance, of course, that CMS can pull their accreditation, but that will not pull or mess with any reimbursement that we have. It just alerts CMS, and CMS will wait for DNV to come in and do that survey. There is a chance that if something happened and DNV could not come, that CMS could come in. But like we said, we would be ready and prepared, and those standards are the same, but it will not change reimbursement.
Is there a reason we're doing this now? And like, so to not mess up things, I mean, CMS is our major payer. I mean, we have a lot of cash that comes in through that. Do we really want to mess with that during this transitional period of COVID? And I'm just asking.
I'll tell you, the CMS part, Ben, I don't think that it will have any repercussions there. The reason we're doing it now is because, one, we are in the window for a survey. If we switch now, we'll go ahead and get our D&D survey in and get it done in the same period of time that the joint was set up. The legwork is going to be for us is any contract that we have with any outside agency that lists one commission will then switch over to DMV, which is both accepted. They're both, the industry standards are both accepted. There's no change in that, other than the name change. So I think that the risk that we have is little to none, because if we don't get a survey, what's going to happen? CMS is going to come in and survey us. So we'll have a survey. It's just that is DMV or joint going to do it, or is CMS going to do it? We probably prefer joint or DMV to do those. Okay. That's all.
On the year 1, 2, and 3, explain to me the difference. We're paying the 44 year 1, and then it looks like we're saving money year 2 and 3. Those are guaranteed. Those are locked in rates
Yes.
for us. And then what happens after that? Is it just reevaluated?
It repeats. So year 1 would be the accrediting survey year. So if you look at the Joint Commission, we pay $13,000 yearly for our partnership. Every third year for accreditation, we pay that additional $32,000. So that's what you're seeing on year 1 with D&D. Year 2 and 3, those are just our partnership, and then the surveys where they come in on site. So it's not an accrediting survey where they come in for a full week and a full up survey. It's a more focused survey where they come in about 3.5 days with a smaller survey team to survey us during that time. And so we pay $25,000 for the mock survey with CIHQ. And so we'll be doing away with that contract and simply going with D&D and utilizing the surveys in between the accreditation years.
So you're right, we have joint that we're paying here, but we're bringing in another one now to pick up in the middle, where DMV will do it all instead of us.
I'd say that's
Yeah.
I just wanted, I figured that was the lock rate for the 3 years. I just want to make sure that what happens after that, is it negotiated or is it?
Yeah, so it'll repeat through there.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Okay, thank you, Courtney. Thank you. All right, we're going to go into executive session. Meeting held in closed session involving any of the following: consultation with attorney regarding legal matters and legal issues pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. 2, deliberation regarding personnel issues pursuant to section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. 11:25.
11, I'm sorry.